I'm Anne Borgen. I'm going to start with a little bit of agriculture update. Before we look at consensus, let's look at agriculture in general. The farm of our parents and grandparents is very different than the farms today, although the majority of farms in this country are still called family farms, which means they're owner, partnership, or closely held family corporation owned. That's 96% of them. So we have a tradition of family farms that not everyone does. I was reading one article in which they were talking about the amount of farmland farmed and how it's done in Ukraine, speaking of contemporary things. Russia and South America tend to be huge industrial farms that are many, many thousands of acres, and they are run by hired managers. And they use GPS systems and all the latest technology, so that the tradition of family farms here is worth keeping, I think, and we still have it. Now they have changed. The percentage of our population who farmed in 1900 was 38%. Today it is 2% of people who live on farms, and 1%, or about 3 million people who farm, actually do the farming. That's not very many for the amount of land they are controlling. We're talking about just over half of our 2.3 billion acres. That's a lot of land. And this has been there has also been a drop in the number of farms from about 6 million in 1940 to 2.1 million today. That's made possible by the explosion of technology after World War II. In 1945, 35% of farms had electricity and 50% had tractors. Imagine. Once they got the tractors, they could farm much more land. Now, it cost more in actual cash, but much less in labor and time and in land to take care of their horses. There's been a current explosion in technology and in information. My family and I have an Angus seed stock or beef breeding operation in Wisconsin. And it is we've been raising registered Angus beef for 30 years. There's a huge amount of data. If you look online for anything, there is no end to the amount of data you can find. We have a website. We sell cattle online at our bull sale. There's, a DV auction. People all around the country can look at the cows moving across and buy them, or the bulls. It will be this spring. So it's another whole world even than it was when we started 30 years ago. Everyone who works on our farm has a degree. There are 3 people who work for us, and if you have been reading this agriculture stuff, you either should be an accountant, a lawyer, a vet, something, because it's a very complex world, farming these days. Let's see. Farm size is defined by sales as well as by acres. The majority of farms, 50%, have from $1,000 to $10,000 in income. The smallest number of farms, that's 5.3%, make over $500,000 in income. And one of the complaints has been it's between those two where the squeeze has been on farms. The next one up, the $250,000 to $500,000 one is doing pretty well. But as they were saying, inputs for farming are very expensive. So that if you're only making this much, you can't put that much into it. It is just too expensive. And then there's also size by acres. And 38% of the people who live on farms have less than 50 acres. So we're talking about very different things. 10,000 acres of corn, 50 acres of maybe vegetables. We'll see. How did the federal government get involved in farming? They got it started under President Lincoln, who established the USDA, United States Department of Agriculture, partly because farming is a very risky business. There are things you can control and things you can't. Those include catastrophic weather, a shortage of labor when you need it. If they can't pick your grapes at the time the grapes are right, you're in trouble. Fluctuations of commodity prices over which farmers have no control. It's trading on the Board of Trade. Or energy prices. Absolutely every cost at the farm goes up if there's energy, whether it's from planting to fertilizer to processing to shipping. All of those things go up if the energy price goes up. And then there are political decisions, both here and abroad, for international trade. And we do a lot of it in this country. Now, if you go to the first question on should the government have financial support, should government financial support for agriculture be directed to? One of them question is subsidized agricultural loans. I'm not going to tell you what to put, but by broadening the crop insurance categories, more loans are available to farmers now based on insurance coverage of their crops. In other words, if you don't have a lot of money, but you can and you need a loan and the bank doesn't want to, it'll loan you money based on your insurance coverage of your crop so that they have collateral. And that helps young farmers, established farmers, everybody. And they have broadened the categories now in this latest farm bill so that people can get coverage on crops that aren't commodities. There are two new programs. They've done away with all direct payments. There aren't any direct payments anymore. But there are two new programs for farmers to choose on crop insurance. One is called price loss average, and that means you're betting there's a certain, that's what I said, you need a degree. There's a certain set amount that they think that crop should be worth, and if it falls below, you get a subsidy, or you get insurance, and that what the subsidy is the government pays for a part of your insurance. They don't pay you. They pay for a part of your insurance. The insurance company pays you. And the other one is that has addressed a lot of the questions that organic, sustainable vegetable farmers had. And in this new farm bill, it is you can insure your farm. So you can insure your farm, all the crops on it, in a lump. And that means that whatever you've planted there, you can get insurance for. You can borrow money on that insurance as collateral too. And that's a big change. I mean, the corn farmers have been able to get insurance for their corn, but this includes all the other smaller farmers. And I think that's a change in this new farm bill. Yes. Crop insurance is 1C. Yeah, right. That's what I'm talking about at the moment. Right, okay. And the first one you gave us. PLC?
Maybe what is the difference between subsidized agricultural credit and loans and commodity crop programs? Crop insurance is, I think we don't understand exactly what those are.
Well, the loan, there are, I don't know how much detail you want to go into. If you look at the new farm bill, there are a lot of loans that are subsidized, or at least covered. You can get a loan from the government for using your crops as collateral, operating loans, microloans, youth loans in rural areas. The Con Act also provides interest financing for producers to purchase farms and ranches, for people who want to get going, for conservation, for if you want to make your farm more conservation friendly, you can get a loan to develop that. Increased limits for down payments if people want to buy a farm. There are also emergency loans to help cover recovery costs. Now, the question for you is, do you approve? Everything costs money. And the people who wrote this new farm bill are saying they're trying to have the government spend less, the farmers more invested, but spread it around, so that more people are covered by the programs we have. So I'm not telling you how to vote,
Darn.
okay? There's disaster assistance. Do you think they should continue it? The extreme weather of 2012 underscored the need for disaster and risk management. It provides programs for livestock producers who lost a lot due to the drought last year, for specialty crops such as fruit and vegetables, which have been hit by freezes. Vines and trees get burned. It enables producers without access to regular crop insurance to buy disaster coverage. Do you approve or disapprove, or no consensus? Is that a good use of government money? Peggy?
I have a question between crop insurance and disaster assistance. If you have crop insurance, whether it is private or government, would you need disaster assistance?
Well, people who don't have crop insurance can get disaster coverage.
But you wouldn't have both.
Yeah. Might.
Isn't disaster coverage usually separate in addition to?
Yeah, but I mean, it's a separate thing. If you are in an area, they even have supplied money retroactively to people who lost cattle during the drought last year. And that's disaster. That's not crop insurance. It's a separate pot of money.
Why would not, if you had both crop and livestock insurance?
One is price loss coverage. That's price. That's across the board.
Crop insurance has basically a guaranteed minimum price?
Yep. It's not guaranteeing that you get it. You can buy the insurance in case, so the insurance company pays you if you didn't get it. And you can also get one that is, as I said, county or farm-based, and that's not price loss, that's the market price for your particular product. And you have to choose one or the other. You can't have both. But this is not disaster. Yes?
Well, I understood crop insurance to be, there's two aspects of it. There's the yield insurance and there's the price aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Disaster, now I'm not sure, because crop insurance in the past has had disasters, like if you have hail, if that's a disaster.
Right.
That was always covered in crop insurance. So I'm not sure if the disaster is like a war, or what is a disaster?
Drought. You have to slaughter your cattle because you don't have any feed. And cattle do not have any crop insurance, you understand. So the point is, it's a different pot for a different purpose. Maybe an addition, but it is not the same. Yes?
So are all these in this area supposed to be subsidies to pay for the insurance for all of these?
That's what these subsidies are now. There are no more direct payments to farmers.
All to help you
Pay for the insurance. And it's a pretty healthy subsidy, and it's higher for some people than others. But the amount, and one of the things is, and I don't know, do you want to go through this one thing at a time?
Question number 2, are you at?
No, we're not on 2 yet. What I'm saying is, here's G, Commodity Livestock Program. There's disaster assistance for livestock, but there's no otherwise commodity help for livestock. The dairy programs are different too. There still are dairy programs. And then there's specialty crops are better served in the new farm bill by offering a choice of whole farm coverage. That's been a big deal, that you can do your whole farm. And your whole farm can be 10 acres or 10,000. But the 10,000 acre people are doing crop insurance. Yes?
Maybe it might be helpful if I'm hearing some of the questions, that these alternatives, maybe if they could have a paragraph or something that describes them, that might be helpful for them to understand what it is more specifically, because some of the terms are probably not common knowledge.
That's right. I've got them, but I'm reading them to you.
We don't have a copy of those.
Yeah. All right, let's go on. Let's try to go on to 2, and we can back up if it's just you don't understand it. What changes should the government make regarding direct payment programs? And that's what I've told you. A, they're eliminated. There are no more direct payments to farmers. They were dropped in favor of broadened insurance programs that farmers can buy into. Update the rule, so all of those are kind of out. They don't do that anymore. So under 2, direct payments are eliminated, just cross it out. All of those have 2. Yes?
Isn't this about what is it that the league believes? So even though the current farm bill did that, does the league still think these are useful things? Is that kind of what we're doing?
Well, if there are no direct payments, then how would we care if they update the rules?
They update the farm bill.
They did, right. All right. Number 3, what changes to current crop insurance programs should the government make? And I guess more crops are covered in the new bill in response to growing complaints that the programs needed to help a wider array of farmers. 2 new programs, and these are the ones I talked about, replace those of the past. The price loss coverage. Insurance pays when the market price for a covered crop is below the reference price, and agricultural risk protection coverage. Insurance that is based on location and pays when a farm's revenue from all crops or a county's revenue is below a benchmark. The farmer chooses which one. This is important. Producers who participate in these programs are required to provide evidence that they are actively engaged in farming. These are complex programs. Those new to farming will need help, and they can get that from their county extension office, the offices, the USDA offices in their hometowns. Should these be extended, should their links be made to the use of conservation practices? I think the answer to that, given who we are, is yes. And such programs, according to the new Farm Bill, such programs need to be better defined, implemented, and have the results measured. A plan is required for a farmer to qualify for a subsidy on insurance for erodible land or wetlands. Farmers have 5 years to come up with their plan. So they're moving in the direction that environmentalists and the league would like. In that sense. Should we limit insurance for the cultivation of marginal and environmentally sensitive land? What's the answer? Yes, probably. Cap the amount of premium subsidy to a single farm operator. There's been lots of controversy on that. In the end, there is no means testing and no subsidy limit. The bill initially ended benefits to anyone whose average adjusted gross income exceeded $900,000 a year, both farm and non-farm. It also set payment limits, but failed to pass. So there are no limits now. And you might want to say you think there should be. Should.
A single farm operator, does that mean a corporation as well as an individual?
No, corporation, unless it's a family corporation, is a separate thing. Number 4, should the government act on any of the following? Now we're off the crop insurance things. Think you're aware of how you want to vote on those?
Let's go on to number 4. We're running short of time here.
Should the government act on any of the following? This is about antitrust legislation. And I suppose the biggest one everybody thinks of is Archer Daniel Midland that got hammered for price fixing. And now I'm going to read you what I wrote about that. Not Archer Daniel. There's concern that consolidation in agriculture in input supplies, seed and fertilizer, and commodity marketing, processing, and retail grocery firms all restrict competition. It is difficult to prove attempted monopolies. They're concerned about horizontal and vertical integration, that you are all moving along in a line and the farmer's a piece in the cog, whether it's up or horizontally. And maybe Beth would know about this. Horizontal and vertical integration in chicken and hog production has helped to keep our food prices lower, but some worry that small farmers and small processors can be hurt. Antitrust laws concern 3 kinds of violations: collusion, doesn't that sound awful, or conspiracy to suppress competition among firms to subvert the free market, predatory conduct to obtain or hold a monopoly. And they say that's really very rare and it would be very hard to prove. And anti-competitive mergers, those likely to lessen competition. And they can move in advance on those before it happens. They prevented, like, Cargill and Continental from merging, or the merger had to be managed. They couldn't have a monopoly in the places where Continental and Cargill were the only options. So they had to keep, anyway, they said that works pretty well. Agricultural producers are permitted to market through cooperatives, and that is not considered a monopoly. High concentration in the market itself is not a violation, but it will trigger scrutiny. And they're telling us they're looking. And the Department of Justice enforces laws. It does not regulate industries. That's the work of Congress. So if there are things we want changed, that's where to go. Go to Congress.
That comes from the Department of Agriculture?
What?
I mean, the scrutiny is-
No, the scrutiny comes from the Department of Justice, but the Department of Agriculture can ask them to look at it.
Oh, I see.
And the Department of Agriculture can also have more stringent rules about antitrust, et cetera. But that's Congress. That's not the Department of Justice. They enforce law, they don't make it, they tell us. All right. I know. Yes. Anything you want to ask in particular? Peggy?
Yeah, on 4C, promoting alternative marketing systems, would that be action money comes from those or what? Because the antitrust laws is sufficient. Why would they need to promote alternative?
Well, they don't tell us that, but the point is, you know, the government, I mean, it's billions of dollars, and they want some of that money to make other ways so that you don't have to go through Chicago Board of Trade to sell your corn. They want to have smaller markets available. And the government has piles of money that it spends. Although 75% of the USDA budget is spent on food stamps, on food programs. But the point is, they want some of that money directed in other areas than crops. You guys, there is an endless supply of information on the National League website if you want to read any more. And I'm hoping that next year we'll continue this discussion. Marty Micks is going to talk about food labeling.
I'm going to do question 7. We had, there's, he's looking for the keyboard. It's research and development, because we already had Beth Thompson talking about animal management. So research and development has changed drastically since ever since they came up with molecular theory, et cetera, and biotechnology. This is our question, and has a lot of sub-questions on the on our consensus. Funding for agriculture. Anne alluded to it under President Lincoln. He started the Department of Agriculture. Also, during that time in 1862, the Morrill Act established land-grant universities, and one of the purposes of these was to teach about agricultural farming techniques and to spread the word so that we would be able to make successful farmers in the New West. Our public funding for agriculture is, through the federal government, state governments, and now we have public-private collaboration in agriculture research. I am using the Cooperative Research and Development Agreements, the CRADAs. Those came about in the 1990s. They're formal arrangements between federal laboratories and private companies to jointly develop and commercialize new technologies. The USDA is working to establish this with public research institutions and private industry. There has always been that hassle about who gets the patent rights, and now that we have seeds that are so valuable and technologies that are so valuable, companies want to make sure that they can be a part of it, and universities are realizing, hey, we need the money too, and so now universities are also getting in a little bit on the royalties of some of their discoveries. Private funding for agriculture. Corporations do research that's applied research versus basic, for the specific goal of a product that's commercially profitable. So when you're thinking corporations, they're really looking to something that is going to make them money, and sooner rather than later. Private corporations also do some basic research, but not as much as the public institutions. The public institutions pretty much lay the groundwork of this great basic research from which private research can then leap with applying that basic research for their own particular needs. Basic research, the purpose is to increase our scientific knowledge base. It does not seek to solve or treat specific problems like applied research. And until recently, much of our basic research in agriculture has been done by the public land-grant universities. Reasons to support government-funded basic research. That's one of the questions you have there, is should the government support basic research? One of the reasons it's essential because commercial and private groups are not as willing to fund basic research, develops a better understanding of new technology and its long-term effects, provides data for risk assessment of new technology and products. And something that I don't have up there, I just read it last night, was that, of course, it's a biased one, so that's why I didn't put it down, but it said that for every dollar that the United States government has invested in agricultural research, we get $35 back. It's been probably one of the best investments that our country has done. And reasons to oppose government, I got these from the League of Women Voters of St. Louis. They said it's a luxury in today's tight budgets. Its findings could result in the development of harmful products. Obviously, when you're dealing with some of these brand new technologies, you never know. EPA and the FDA are already underfunded and unable to perform the necessary inspections and oversight to provide for safe food. So I hope that gave you a little knowledge on whether you want to vote yes on the basic research. New technologies. There's questions in there. They're talking about the new technologies. It refers to genetic engineering, nanotechnology, other new techniques. It does not include the traditional breeding or hybridization techniques. And we're not going to be tested on this. Genetic engineering, basically, you're rearranging or eliminating or introducing some new genes using methods of modern molecular biology, particularly those techniques referred to as recombinant DNA techniques, where they insert one or more individual genes between organisms or species to create a new organism. Therefore, it'd be called a genetically modified organism, a GMO. Transgenesis, that's pretty much, I talked about that already, didn't I? That was the one I already had on the other slide. Cisgenesis is another form of genetic engineering where you transfer the genes between closely related organisms that could otherwise be conventionally bred, using the same techniques that are used to produce transgenic organisms. But this speeds up the breeding process, allowing specific modifications to be accomplished much more quickly rather than going years and years and years of trying to have the right genetics of a plant or of an animal. The evolution of genetic engineering applications in the U.S., the earliest was an insulin derived from recombinant DNA, first marketed in 1978. It's been a fairly recent phenomenon. First GE food application was for genetically modified rennet, which is approved for use in cheese in 1990. First GE food crop was the Flavor Savor tomato in 1994. Actually, I remember that name. Does anyone else remember the name of the Flavor Savor? 1995, now we're getting into the things we're starting to see some of the long-term effects. Insect-resistant corn. BT refers to that Bacillus thuringiensis. It was something we all used in organic gardening for our broccoli and such. It's a fairly innocuous thing, but it keeps those worms out. But we're starting to get some resistance to some of these things. Corn, herbicide resistant, they call that HT. And soybeans were also introduced. All that same year, 1995, was a big year for some new genetic engineering in our corn and soybeans. 1995, we got the first stacked GE cotton seeds, so you have not only resistant to insect, but also you can throw in all kinds of weed killer and it's not going to kill the plant. So here, Anne referred to this earlier, reasons for genetic engineering. Am I talking too fast? To generate a higher yield for a crop, GE corn revenue per acre is $1,073. GE soybeans were $596. You can see those are the ones, if you're a farmer, you want to go with those. And, you know, we talk about oats. Oats are not genetically modified, not at all. There's no oats grown anywhere with that because it costs a lot of money to invest in genetic engineering. Some say like $60 million just to get some of these new processes in. So oats are pretty much left. We don't have a huge worldwide demand. Anyway, genetic engineering reasons provides for disease, insect, or herbicide resistance. You can enhance the nutritional value. You can create it by engineering, adding in certain components of minerals or vitamins. Allow plants to thrive under unfavorable growing conditions such as cold, drought, or soil salinity, and increase the pharmaceutical value, or create a plan more effective for phytoremediation, pulling pollutants from soil or water. I actually said the word right, I think. GE crops today, some new exciting things for those who are tired of bruised potatoes. They just received approval May 2013, and they're doing the same thing with apples that is now being developed. Now, we have genetic engineering for our cotton and our corn. It represents 90% of our planted acreage. Soybeans and canola represent 93% of planted acreages. As I said, there's no GE oats, not enough worldwide demand to justify that expense of genetic research on the oats. Now, nanotechnology, that is the thing that is so hard to even imagine. Nano is the tiniest, tiniest thing. If you take a sheet of paper and you just look at it, just, you know, through the what was it, I don't know what it is, just the various thinnest thing, you could fit 100,000 nanometers in that very, very tiny thing. It's a process that builds, controls, and restructures materials that are the size of atoms and molecules. FDA has no official definition. The Royal Academy in England of Royal Engineers Working Group does have a definition, but I didn't want to bore you with that. As of 2013, over 1,600 commercially available products contain nanomaterials. Those sunscreens that we put on our face and our body when we go out tanning, there's just really very tiny, tiny nanomaterials in there that prevent the body from absorbing light. There has been some concern also with sunscreen, so stain repellents. Now, you'll notice that there's not much in the way of foods in there. Have you noticed that? Of all these commercial things, you don't see too much in foods for a reason. There's a little concern. Everyone's kind of backing off a little bit because they don't want, especially in Europe, the same reaction like they had to genetically engineered crops. Let's see here. When I go to future uses, the multi-walled carbon nanotubes. Now, those are, again, tiniest, tiniest little things, and they can penetrate through thick coatings on seeds, which could stimulate germination of seeds and stimulate the growth of certain plants. The concern, because it's so tiny, that it could also go through the blood-brain barrier. Future uses, they're looking at precision farming, where you could have sensors distributed in the field and link through, that's supposed to be GPS, to detect soil conditions, insects, or presence of disease. You could have smart delivery systems delivering chemicals in a controlled, targeted manner to address a problem such as disease, nutrient deficiency, or insects, even before the farmer can visually detect a problem, or incorporate into packaging to detect spoilage or act as a preservative. Right now, it's done in some packaging for beer, keep it from spoiling. Diversified and sustainable agriculture. When I was looking that up, there is no succinct definition. But when Dr. Thompson was talking about the animal composting of the carcasses, that's definitely sustainable. When you're looking at diversity of crops and seeds so that you don't have all your eggs in one basket. You know, the new seeds that they're making can't make little baby seeds in many cases. They're creating new seeds that you have to buy them each year. And in fact, there's a farmer who was getting some seeds, and there was all, heck to pay for him doing that. There is, let's see, so we have the diversity of crops and seeds, and then of course, I was looking at the University of California at Davis, and their big concern is protecting the water there, and they want to make sure that their farming is really not putting any kind of pollution into the waters, because whatever water they have is very precious. USDA has a Sustainable Agricultural Research and Education Program, so that if you were interested in that or you had family or friends, it's quite a big deal. So I put that on the glossary for you. Done. Did I do it in 10 minutes? Okay. On we are to Lynn.
The last topic that we were able to figure out how to cover was food safety. We did not get to labeling. So you're going to have to read the materials. I have handouts at the back of the room. The first one we're going to start with is the responsibility chart, because the first thing that caught my eye was how many organizations are involved in food safety. The glossary is at the bottom of the page telling you what all the acronyms are for, but every single one of them have some piece of the pie, and some of them overlap. That leads to the second page, which I'm not going to go through that whole chart, that's just too much, which is called the problem at the top of the page. What that tells you is that food safety was 42% of the FDA budget through the 1970s. It is less than 25% since 2003. That means that there's fewer samples being taken and fewer measurements being taken at any level and at all levels. And you may have noticed that we've had more episodes of listeria and other kinds of contamination in food, whether it was lettuce or meat or any other kind of vegetables. And it's been going up because there simply isn't enough capacity in the system to do the inspections the way we used to do them. And it all ties back to taxes. Of course, federal employees are paid with federal taxes, and if you cut federal tax rates, obviously that's going to get cut too. FDA, for example, has about 2,000 inspectors, but they have to cover 130,000 facilities. And USDA has 7,800 inspectors. They cover about 6,800 facilities, but the USDA has to inspect all meat carcasses, whereas the FDA does a statistically significant sample, which can miss a lot. And obviously, it can miss a lot. So those issues are really paramount in food safety. If everything flows from that fact. There is a proposal for modernizing the system, and I'll go through that in a minute. But so far, although the total cost has been estimated around $1.4 billion, they've only appropriated $50 million. That doesn't pay for a whole lot of modernization. The approaches to inspection is a little more detailed, and that's this sheet. It tells you what the USDA and the FDA really have responsibility for. I didn't go into every one of them, because these are the two big ones. EPA has some piece of it with water quality and things like that, but really when it comes down to food, it's FDA and USDA. One of the issues that is covered in the consensus is what do you do about changes to existing products? And there is an acronym, GRAS, generally regarded as safe. And that means that the substance has been previously tested, and the question is if they make a change to an underlying ingredient, if red dye changes to something else or somebody changes a perfume or a flavor or something, do they have to retest the whole thing? That's up in the air. And that's one of the consensus questions, actually it's several of them, both pre- and post-marketing testing of changes or developments to new products or existing products. And that's a debate in the environment, not just with the league. Within the entire industry, they aren't settled on that. Some say, yeah, you should retest everything, and oh, by the way, Archer Daniels Midland or General Mills or anybody else, you shouldn't be doing your own testing. You should be handing it off to a different organization because we don't entirely trust you to be totally fair and straight with us. Other people say, yeah, but that adds cost and time to the system, which of course it does. So that's the cost and investment debate on that one. Who does it? How much faith do you put in it? At what point does it come in? If they change one ingredient, is that a big deal, a medium deal, or a little deal? Yes, sir.
This is a real broad question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm familiar with large-scale feedlots that I was concerned with at one point, and that is the responsibilities, private versus public. I advocated very strongly for performance by the public, basically performance bonds, so that if there was a problem, whatever it was, is that the person who created the problem would be responsible for fixing the problem. I don't hear a lot of that going on anymore. I don't know if we're accepting and we're looking for the government to solve all of our problems, or if we're taking private initiative to solve them, or to make people accountable, or companies accountable, or whatever else. Is that on
It's not in this consensus specifically. It comes up at the legislature all the time. And a separate life in league that I'm also on Action Committee, and specifically in environment. The agricultural community has very strong lobbyists, and they're very protective of the people who are responsible for producing, whether it's animals or food, plants, what doesn't matter. It is difficult. If you're going to cut the number of inspectors, then saying that, the public will inspect doesn't work.
No, I'm talking even broader than food. Another issue that we're kind of tracking is this mine, copper and nickel mine up north.
Polymet.
Yeah, and the consequences, which could be real long-term.
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to pick up that? Are we looking to the government down the road to fix that mess? Or is Polymet going to have enough money in a pot to fix it? What does it look like?
Well, right now, this is probably not the meeting for that, but I can take 30 seconds on it. There is a request from the actually a demand from the environmental community generally to demand what we call financial assurance or financial responsibility from any mining operation, because behind Polymet, there's a group from Chile that is also looking at going into northern Minnesota. So the issue is whether it is agriculture, whether it is mining or anything else. I do think the issue of financial responsibility across public policy is coming back up. Who's responsible for paying for what? Because somehow, those costs get built into the system, whether it's private or public. And the question is whether the state has the right or ability to both demand and enforce those demands. And that's true in agriculture. And, you, Mr. or Mrs. Farmer, you have to prove to me that you didn't use antibiotics, or you did the right things in the process, or you didn't. And, it's who is responsible for doing those activities, those inspection activities. And if there is a problem that comes up, they do. There are accidents. There are people who are simply not as adept as others. And so when a problem arises, who's responsible for cleaning it up? And, is there a public interest in cleaning something up, or is it all private, or is there a mix? And that's the debate that's taking place across industries. Polymet is a good example, but so is the issue of agriculture. Things happen. Obviously weather happens, and accidents happen, and rivers flood and overtake and, leave all kinds of things on the floodplains that were planted. Who cleans it up? If there's contamination because a sewage system was breached during a flood, who's going to pay for that? Is that insurance? Is that the farmer? Is that us? In the food prices, all of this comes into play. Financial assurance is really a good question, and it is sort of built into some of the consensus questions of, do we want to ask for more inspections? And if so, who does them? And then, the subtext, who pays for it?
That's why I'm raising it.
Yep.
This is an overall thing.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It is an overall thing, and it applies across multiple areas of public interest. And certainly in agriculture, it does happen. If you want to know more about, I did some highlights of the Food Safety Modernization Act. There's a sheet on that. It tells you what the proposal is, and it also tells you the four major things it doesn't cover. It does not cover risks, if there are any, from GMOs, genetically modified crops at all, from pesticide use, from antibiotic resistance. Some of these things are under the USDA jurisdiction, some are not. Some of them are EPA because they're considered environmental. Foods that are imported, we don't really have much control over what they do in Brazil. And yet we're importing food from Brazil. There's a problem with making regulations scale appropriate or conservation friendly. If you have 2 acres and you're doing, organic farming, that's very different from 150,000 acres in Iowa. So how do you apply these across? It's obviously you do different ways of inspection. You can't inspect every crop in 150,000 acres. So that is a problem. There is also a problem in now that we're beginning to get into more of the science behind some of these things. We don't take people's word for it. We've always done it this way. But is that the right way? Is that the best way? Is it effective, or is there damage to it that we didn't know before? And as if all that weren't interesting enough, then there's the whole problem of, oh gosh, 40 years after the fact, we're finding out that margarine was a bad idea. Sometimes the damage from things doesn't show up until a long time later, when you've had time to do these studies across populations. So the issues in agriculture and food safety are human power, how many people, what's the concentration of that we're going to look at? Is it going to be everything, 10% of everything, a statistically significant sample? What's the cost versus the benefit of doing that? Do we require a lot of testing? Europe is doing that these days. The EU is asking for a lot of certification before anything gets into the food chain. The US is typically taking a more free market approach and saying, no, we'll do some, but not all. What happens if something, if Oreos have been on the market for 70 years and they decide to change from sugar to maybe stevia or something? How big a deal is that? How much testing do we need for that? So all of these things are coming into the food safety questions. So when they're talking about enforcing pre-market testing requirements for foods and food additives, or requiring developers to monitor food, who's responsible? If I develop a product and 20 years later it's shown to be a problem, but it wasn't at the time, am I still responsible? Or is somebody else? If it looked good at the time, which margarine did, what do we do 30, 40 years later and we find out, gosh, trans fats were not a good idea? Who's responsible at that point? And that goes on with, the collection of data, who does it, antibiotics, all of these things all looked good at the time. Gosh, if we prevent these things, wouldn't that be better than letting them die of it or get into the food chain with it? Well, then now we have problems with resistance to antibiotics. And it's being transferred to humans. There's so many downstream effects that weren't predicted at the time, but that's going to be true going forward too. Anything we do today or develop today, we may find out 20 years from now stevia is a bad idea. But how are we going to know that when we're buying things today or when we're raising them today? So I'm not sure that I can give you great answers to these questions. What I saw in them was a whole lot of, gosh, I don't know. And I'm not sure. I think in every case it's going to be strike a balance. Do the best you can with what you've got at the time, and also hold open the opportunity or option to have some organization, be it the USDA, be it the farmer, be it the producer, maybe research research labs, whether they are public or private or educational, to keep testing and keep looking at things and saying, is it still okay? Is there any downstream impact that we're beginning to see that we wouldn't have seen at the time? It's much harder. I thought it was going to be a whole lot easier to resolve these questions, frankly. Well, food is safe or it isn't. Well, not exactly. I wish it were that simple, but it really doesn't come down to that. Do you have any other questions? Does this give you enough? Are you comfortable with that you've got enough at least to get an idea? I don't know anything more about this than what was in the consensus myself, but I have certainly been educated about the issues that I didn't even know existed before.
Thank you, Lynn.
you.
I'm going to just take about 10 minutes to get through the food labeling questions, 9, 10, and 11. The first question, of course, is how sufficient are the following regarding current food labeling? The nutrition facts on food labels, are they insufficient, sufficient, too much, or no consensus? So when you're thinking about how you would answer that when you go into your groups, here is what is required right now. that it must have the name of the product, the ingredient list, nutritional information, the net quantity, allergy information, and contact information, the manufacturer, the packer, and/or the distributor. And you'll notice that it's required that they're now putting down the calories from fat, and we've got the saturated fat, trans fat. Once we found out trans fat was bad, that came in there. Cholesterol, dietary fiber, sugars. Vitamin A and C, calcium and iron were all mandatory to have listed. And they are now currently, one of the FDA is looking to change the rule on that. They find that there's not as many people having problems of a shortage of vitamin A or C. So now they are looking to, I have it here. They're going to require vitamin D and potassium on the nutrition facts. Vitamin D, now you might have heard in England there were some people who are getting rickets again. If you're wearing all head coverings and not seeing any sun, that's a problem, especially if you don't drink milk. Yes?
Aren't they required to have total calories, not just?
Yes, you know what? Yes. I'm glad you said that, because I was having the hardest time getting this thing to show. Here it is. Over here you've got your calories for a person on a 2,000 calorie needs diet and 2,500. It's kind of changing to the percent daily values now, and I'm glad there. Can you kind of see that they have that? Okay. So the question is, as you're looking to answer the consensus, is do you feel that there's already enough on the label? Do you need your reading glasses to read what's already on there? Are there things different that you feel are important? All those things you might consider when you're answering that question. We've also got, yeah.
Don't they have labels for gluten because there's so many gluten?
That is voluntary. It's a voluntary one. But it is mandatory. The Food Allergen Labeling and Consumer Protection Act of 2004 was created because we've got a lot of people who are having more allergies. There's 160 known food allergens, but 90% are all from these little 8 groups. And it's milk, eggs, fish. Now, crustacean shellfish, that's your crab and the lobster and shrimp. It doesn't include the mollusks. If you remember your zoology, it doesn't include, clams and oysters. Tree nuts, wheat, and peanuts, and soybeans. Those are the big ones for possible allergens, and they use soy powder and things, so now they'll have to say on the bottom of the label, contains. And then we get to your question there. Just this year, the FDA issued their finalized rules for the voluntary labeling of gluten-free products. Obviously, the health industry and consumer groups have been behind modern food labeling. So it's 1 in 133 individuals now have gluten allergies or sensitivities. That's quite a bit. When they talk about health ingredient claims, I didn't quite know where to go with that, so I was looking at the kinds of claims. It says it claims that consumers can understand. So the question is, you see the qualified health claims as an example. You might see on your oat cereal box, 3 grams of soluble fiber from oatmeal daily in a diet low in saturated fat and cholesterol may reduce the risk of heart disease. So it's a qualified health claim. You can say that this particular product, and you can link it with scientific evidence to that particular disease. Yeah, but the cereal only has 2 grams, so you better get another half of a bowl of cereal to make sure you've got enough. Structure and function claims. Those are just things that, describe the effect on a function of the body or structure. Example, calcium builds strong bones. That can be big on the package. Nutrient claims. At first I didn't think there was anything to those, and then I found out that actually there is a little bit to it. As an example, if you say something is high in something, it must contain at least 20% of the daily value, or RDI. And if it says it's a good source, it must contain at least 10% to 19% of the daily value. Okay, so those are the health claims. So do you think that's insufficient, sufficient, too much? Can we understand it? Obviously, if I didn't know what high meant versus good, maybe most people don't, I don't know. A myriad of marketing claims. Out of 101 marketing claims listed on the website below, only 8 were verified regularly and determined to be true. So that is always a problem. Now, it doesn't mean that the intentions aren't good, but if you don't have inspectors, we're getting back to what Lynn is saying, there's just not the money to check out those things. But if you are concerned, and we got 8 that are verified regularly and determined to be true. Animal welfare approved, certified organic. I didn't realize certified organic really means what it is. Grass-fed, global animal partnership, fair trade. We're seeing that more in the stores too. Food Alliance, certified humane, and biodynamic. Don't ask me what those all are. Lynn.
There is one other that the distinction between natural and organic is also watched.
Yes. I could actually show you, maybe I won't. I don't want to open it then. Okay. It's food labeling for dummies, and it was really kind of a good site to look at. Should foods with GMO ingredients have labeling requirements? That's question 11. The pros are consumers' right to know, especially concerning products for which health and environmental concerns have been raised but not proven. I have a paper from University of Minnesota, and they're just saying that we can't say everything's all safe, but we can't say it's not safe either. Pros, other countries, including the European Union, require GMO food content. The cons are about 70% of the food we eat in the U.S. contains ingredients that have been produced from genetically modified crops. And the cons, it unfairly penalizes farmers, producers, especially the small producers, because it takes a lot of time and energy to figure it out what percentages of GMO you have in your product, and retailers who would incur a multitude of additional costs that they'll have to pass on to consumers. In Europe, they require, if a product has more than, the threshold is 0.9%. If it has that, then they have to say it has GMO products there. Same, Australia is 1%. Japan's a little higher. You can go up to 5% GMO and still be considered, and not have to label it as such. Those who are a little bit more strict on it recommend that foods contain no more than 0.01% genetic engineered foods to be considered GE-free. The safety assessment of GE foods, I think I've mentioned that too. The meaning of safety itself is, they say, is contentious. Broad agreement that improved testing protocols are needed. Testing should be done on a product-by-product basis, and that blanket statements about all GE foods being safe or unsafe cannot be made based on the current science. Little concerns about some of the nanotechnology. There's agreement this technology may be really important in the future, but with the rapid expansion of research and development, there are questions as to how safe it is, the potential toxicity from these products, because there are some out there that already has a silver nitrate, I think it is. The risks include the ability of the particles to cross the blood-brain, dermal, placental, or other barriers, potential impacts on biological systems and control and tracking of the particles. So in other words, that technology that can get through into the seed, inside to the seed, can also get inside our bodies much further than we probably would want them to. More future uses, precision farming, which would really be cool to act as sensors that are distributed in the field. I think I already read, we already did that one, didn't we? So I could save a little time, yes. There's silver particles used in pesticide and the treatment of pears can be retained on the pear surface and penetrate into the pulp, so potentially be taken into the human body. Concerned about the effects in the environment on soil organisms and insects. Titanium dioxide. That's another one that has a potential risk that needs to be evaluated. Done. Okay.
Thank you all very much. I think we need at least a semester, don't you, to study these issues. It is an awful lot to take on in one morning. And if any of you are concerned that you didn't get the answers you need, there is a lot of information on the National League website to answer what they think is important to answer these questions. We hope you can fill out your consensus, and we hope you'll be interested in following up on some of these questions in the future. Thanks for coming.